So yeah, to start off, I would love if you could kind of briefly tell us, like I said, the story of CEOIQ and how you got that started and where it's all come from.
Sure. I started CEOIQ actually 20 years ago in June of this year. It was kind of weird having a 20-year anniversary in this coronavirus mess because I had planned some
Hmm.
celebrations and having all my clients come to my house and all
Yeah,
that.
20 years in 2020, right? That's a
20
big,
years and 20 years in 2020. I left
yeah.
my last corporate job in 1999 and I really wasn't quite sure what I was going to do, and I got really enamored of the idea of working with smaller to mid-sized companies on growing and developing their businesses, and that I could do that through a combination of advisory services. Kai, I really don't do much in the way of pure consulting, where it's okay, we've got this problem, solve it for us. I don't do it that way. I really provide advisory services and workshops, and I want my advisees to come up with the answer based on the questions that I'm presenting them with and suggesting that they work with and like that. So I really crafted this to be an advisory to CEOs, to people who own and run their own businesses. And I started it from literally dead scratch 20 years ago. Took 4 or 5 years to really build it up, and it began getting some traction and momentum. And my gosh, it's hard to believe I've clicked 20 years with CEOIQ now, because I'd come out of corporate America where I'd been a turnaround guy for 15 years. And I just kind of burned out on being a turnaround guy. I was the guy that you did not want to see on your doorstep because we probably weren't going to have a lot of fun together. I was there to either fix it or close it, and it really didn't matter which, because we were bleeding red ink by the train load. And I did about 6 of those assignments around the country. I got tired of being the guy putting the X's through the org chart and closing offices and all that sort of stuff. And so this set me on a new course for this part of my career, which I sort of viewed as, I don't know whether you'd call it the last quarter or the last third or something. I don't know. I kid about I'm going to keep going until they carry me out of a meeting room on a flip chart one day.
Oh, that's too funny. Yeah, it's kind of like you switched from, like you said, being the one that had to kind of do the cleaning up and closing doors to, helping CEOs keep their business going. Very
Well,
much
it's been a
that,
lot
like
more focus
empowering
on
them.
growth and on how do we do something different.
Yeah.
I've actually been astride of, over the last 20 years, about $600 million worth of sale transactions where my people have sold. I just had one of my guys sell very successfully in about a $60 million transaction that was very, very cool. And when I started working with him about 12 years ago, he literally did not even have a balance sheet. He had all these receivables over on the side that were not on his balance sheet. They weren't contributing to the shareholders' equity of his company. He was dramatically understating. Worked with him and his attorneys and all that over a long period of time to really get the business to where it was ready to sell. And then we very successfully executed a transaction. So, that some of that's been the most exciting part of it. Unfortunately, from time to time, my turnaround skills have come into play because somebody's in trouble. And I can always reach back into that kit bag if I need to. But what I've loved about doing this for 20 years is that I get to use everything I have learned in, God, I hate to think about it, 50 years of being in business in one way or another. And yet I still get to learn something new every day. And so it keeps me on the edge, keeps me engaged, keeps me active. And I work with, as I love to say, I have a 50-yard line seat on some of the most interesting lives in town. So it's a great way to stay engaged, and I still get time to go run around and shoot cool pictures like the one behind me in Iceland.
I was gonna say, yeah, and then in your free time you go take these awesome pictures.
Right, right,
That's so
exactly.
cool.
So it works out well. It really
Yeah.
does. Absolutely, Kai.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. So, as I saw on your website, there's this really cool word that you use, and I'm not sure if I know how to pronounce it correctly. Is it arete?
Ar- Arate,
Arete.
arate.
Awesome.
There's
So, yeah, can you tell viewers and listeners kind of what that is and kind of why you sort of chose that word to focus on?
Sure. Arate, in the way I use it, which has a little accent mark out over the E. There's two versions of arate. Actually, the French word is arête, which means the ridge of a mountain. Okay, the top edged ridge of a mountain. But arete is an ancient Greek word. It literally goes back to 2,000 years before current era. Um, Used by people like Aristotle and Plato and like that. I tripped across arete 20 years ago when I was starting CEOIQ. And there's no direct translation in English, but the concept is that arete is about the pursuit of excellence and achieving your highest potential. And so it was popularized in our culture in the 1970s in a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by a guy named Robert Pirsig. And Pirsig died, as a matter of fact, not too long ago. There's an entire chapter in Pirsig's book about arete. I came across the word out of an edit. Actually, it was I think a blog post somebody had and it really, it occurred to me that because I operate these peer advisory groups, and so I have people in my groups, they're all in different businesses. Okay, they all come from different backgrounds. I've got people with high school diplomas sitting next to PhDs. Okay, I've got people running $10 million businesses sitting next to $1 billion businesses. And it really struck me that that word summed up why you would be part of this, be part of CEOIQ, because the value is in the diversity, and that each one of us, our pursuit of excellence and achieving our highest potential looks different to each one of us. And coming to a place where we appreciate that I may be running a $100 million business with 600 people in it, but there's something I can learn from the guy sitting next to me who's running a $10 million company with 50 people. And so appreciating that achieving highest potential and the pursuit of excellence looks different to each one of us, and that because yours looks different than mine, that means there's an opportunity for us to learn from each other. So arete really resonated with me in a huge way, that I've made it a foundation of our practice at CEOIQ and of what we talk about constantly on, and we use the term the journey of arete, because it is an endless journey with really no endpoint, no destination.
I love that. That's awesome. And that's a perfect segue into my next question, which was, as I was doing my research, I noticed that, some of the coolest things you do is the peer groups and the leadership labs, right, for CEOs and
Right.
other company leadership members. So, and just me, I'm saying like these seem to really be driven by innovation and collaboration amongst groups of people, and how you're saying, you can learn from all the different people around the table. So my question really is, like, in this virtual day and age, how do you think companies and leaders within those companies can, leverage group activities in the best way?
Sure. You know, we were required to pivot very fast in March of this year. It wasn't like we had a vote. For example, I do executive coaching. So each member of my peer group I meet with literally face to face once a month for 90 minutes to 2 hours or thereabouts. Just kind of depends. And I've got some guys in that universe who say, I never want to do anything but see you face to face, Griffin. I always want to sit across the table from you. I always want to be eyeball to eyeball with you. Even my most hard bitten, I got to see you guy had to go virtual. And so what I think all organizations have had to do, and failure to embrace this has put you way behind the curve, you've had to embrace virtuality in your business. That's brought its own set of problems. Like, how do you keep people engaged virtually? Like, how do you deliver bad news virtually? Because it's much tougher than delivering good news virtually. So you've got to think through more. But for my peer advisory group now, my CEO group, and the one we have in Columbus, Ohio too, we've been meeting virtually because we can't meet face to face, and really, quite frankly, some of us don't want to meet face to face right now. So it's had to completely change how we interact with each other. It means typically shorter meetings, okay, that you can't meet forever. It means more breaks. It means more compressed content, and sometimes more frequent contact. So like my peer group, we typically met once a month for a full day face to face in a meeting room, and that's the way we would interact with each other. We then immediately we meet once a month from 9 to 12:30, half a day. But then the other 3 weeks of the month, on Thursday afternoons, I opened up a hour-and-a-half office hours session. Drop by, we'll talk about whatever you need to talk about. For a while, it was all about PPP and all of those kinds of things. But then as we kind of got through that crisis, and also we all started bringing our favorite adult beverage to the meeting, and just having a virtual cocktail hour. And so you've had to shift, and you've had to think about it differently. I think what's interesting is that a whole lot of companies have found, you know what? We're pretty effective at this, and it costs a lot less. I mean, that's been the revelation that's going on, is that we can be effective. Yesterday, Kai, I facilitated a meeting with 10 people in a meeting room south of me here in the Maryland area. Okay, one of the participants was on from the Washington area, south of Seattle. So I had 9 people in a meeting room, one guy out in Seattle, Washington, and I'm on virtually, and we ran a meeting about strategy for these 10 different businesses. And so you've got to come up with creative ways to do it. It takes different ways to present it. It takes using the ability to share screens like we did for those photos. I'm projecting videos. I had them doing some writing at one point, and I actually played music so that there was a background for them, and that sort of thing. So it's totally doable. You just have to think differently. And I think that McKinsey & Company is using this term, the next normal, which I think it really, really does a great job of describing where we're headed. We're headed to a next normal. It's not going back. You know, Doug, oh shoot, I can't think of his last name. The CEO of American Airlines has been quoted as saying he thinks business travel may never go back to what it was in 1999, because we've learned that we don't need to put road warriors out there like we used to. So it's doable. You can be effective. You can leverage your team effectively. You just have to think differently.
Some of what you were saying kind of reminded me of how conferences are seeing this, you know, if they go virtual instead of face to face, they used to be limited very much by a capacity of how many people can you fit in your venue, right?
Right.
Then they go virtual, and they've got thousands upon thousands of people signing up for their content. You know, and so that's just way more than they ever would have expected in a face-to-face person conference.
That's very true. I mean, what you're missing, I can't tell you that it's a perfect substitute. You're
Right.
missing the informal, in the hallway, at the cocktail lounge interaction. That's an important part of those events. There's no question about it. I've learned, for example, on Zoom, I can take a group. I had a group of 30 people on Zoom a couple of weeks ago. I broke them down into breakout rooms of 4. Okay, so that, and I gave them some specific things to talk about, but they got so engaged with each other, I had a hard time getting them back. You know, they didn't want to leave the breakout rooms because it's so effective. And so again, it's not perfect for sure. It's not a perfect substitute for that informal interaction that goes on at things like that. But at the same time, it is so much more cost effective. I mean, what's interesting is a lot of my companies are, yeah, their revenue's down a little bit. They're actually just fine in terms of profit because they're spending so much less. And what companies are finding is that all that money I was spending going to those trade shows and paying thousands of dollars for that booth and all that sort of stuff, it obviously wasn't doing much because my business is doing okay, thank you, and I'm not spending that money.
Yeah, and then, they can figure out different and new ways that maybe are more effective to spend some of that money.
I think that's what McKinsey talks about as the next normal.
Yeah,
That we're going to have a next normal in this process, and it's just going to be very
different.
different. Going to
Yeah,
be very different. It really will.
yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. So here for my last question, kind of in that thread of sharing information and giving advice, like in the peer groups and the leadership labs that we were talking about, I saw that you do a podcast and like some blog posts and stuff as well. And some of the more recent ones were about insight into hiring and interviewing potential employees during,
Right.
COVID-19 while everything is virtual. Um, and so, as I imagine, a lot of that is preparation, right, and finding the right candidate. But the other half, I think it probably a lot of the times comes down to trust in a virtual workforce, which brings me to Acuity as your virtual accountant force. I'm just curious
Yes.
to know, behind the scenes, like what has it been like to quote unquote hire an outsourced financial team, right? And, have
Right.
confidence and trust leading the way with that.
Yeah. It's really good. When you sent me that in advance, it caused me to think back over the whole thing because I've been with Acuity now for,
Yeah.
gosh, Kai, I don't know, 5 or 6 years.
Mhm.
I think it's been that long. Um, so up to that time, I told you I started my business in 2000, and I'm a solopreneur. Okay, now I've got independent contractors, I've got people that work with me and all that, but really my wife and I are the only employees, the only W-2 employees. So solopreneurs wear every hat imaginable. I've got enough background in accounting and finance that I was the person doing all the bookkeeping, which meant that QuickBooks lived on my computer, and I was constantly updating to the current version and all that. And I was under so much stress over it, Kai, because every summer, in fact, right about now, I wouldn't have time for a call like this because my books are 6 months behind. Okay. I haven't posted anything, quite frankly. It's all sitting there on the credit cards and the bank statements and all that junk. It's in total disarray. And I am stressed out to the max trying to catch it up for the tax people. Okay. And then I'm trying to get it right, and I can't do any work. I can't do anything for my business because I'm doing all this bookkeeping stuff. I was so stressed out about it one year that I think I found Acuity on a Google search is how I found Acuity. Or it may have been, you know what it may have been? My virtual assistant down in Miami. I have a virtual assistant in Miami, Florida, that I said, Rana, help me find a bookkeeping service. She found you guys, and I reached out. I have to tell you, I was highly, highly skeptical, okay, of the idea that how in heaven's name could I have somebody someplace I mean, I truly don't even know physically where Deanna is, the woman from Acuity that I've worked with for so long now.
Yeah. I
How
don't
could
know if
that
I know
ever
where she
work?
is.
Well, there you go. So, I really, and I was highly skeptical. And then on top of that, Acuity wants me to switch over to QuickBooks Online from QuickBooks on and so now all my stuff's going to be in the cloud somewhere. And it's like, as a dedicated lifelong control freak, that kind of scared me pretty well too, to tell you the truth, Kai. And so, but the folks at Acuity, both from the marketing side and then from the implementation side, because we had to convert everything that was on my computer over to the QuickBooks Online version. and get that all set up and cross-check it and get it all ready to go. And then the idea of giving some complete stranger that I don't know the access to my bank account, my credit cards, and all that stuff to download all those transactions, I was highly skeptical. My endorsement of Acuity is that, first of all, you guys made it easy. And the way they built the relationship with me to begin with, it was pretty easy to build that trust. And it has worked so well. And it is so wonderful to be able to dial on to QuickBooks Online, and it's all up to date. It's all current. It's all right there. I trust it. I've got confidence that the amount that it says is in my operating checking account is right. Okay. And so it has taken so much stress off of me, the relationship with Acuity. I just now, frankly, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. It has been, without a doubt, one of the top 2 or 3 business decisions I've made in the last 5 or 6 years, in terms of lowering my stress level and allowing me to spend much more of my time focused on my business instead of trying to play junior bookkeeper, which I'm not very good at, by the way.
That is so, I mean, that's so great to hear, though. I love, that you've had such a great experience and have that trust with our team, that's everything we work for.
Well, and you do work for it, I mean, you guys reach out. I don't take advantage of all of your services like maybe I could. And I don't have the complexity of probably the vast majority of your clients, And as a solopreneur, I probably have more of a financial background than the typical person that might have his own solo business working out of a bedroom or something like that. I mean, I've got a fairly extensive financial background, and so I get what I need to do and all that sort of stuff. We're not seekers of trade credit, so we don't need advice about borrowing money and all that. But the fundamentals of knowing every single month that my books are right, it's invaluable, Kai. It has just reduced my personal stress level more than I can tell you. It really,
and then
has.
You are able to make, informed business decisions that, revolve around finances and
right.
Be able to know, like, if your numbers are right, then the decisions you're making based on those, can be confident.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Yay. Well, thank you so much for, hopping on this call and sharing your awesome photography and the story of CEOIQ and your feedback on Acuity. It's such a blessing, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been nice meeting you.
Yeah, you too. Awesome. Right. Well, have a great rest of your day and have a great weekend as well.
You too, Kai. Have a great weekend. Nice talking with you. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.